He was a high-flying executive, and she was the wife he'd long dismissed as a simple homemaker, someone over her head in his world of high finance. He told her he was going to the most important dinner of his career, a dinner to save his failing company by impressing a new, mysterious investor. What he didn't tell her was that he was bringing his young, ambitious mistress to celebrate the win he felt he deserved. But what she never told him was that she was the mysterious investor. The stage was set for a public unraveling, and by the time the appetizers arrived, one person's life would be in ruins. The Waterford crystal glasses in Eleanor Vance's hand were so fine they seemed to hum with tension. She polished the rim of a champagne flute, her reflection staring back at her from the immaculate glass. It was the face of a woman who had everything: the sprawling Greenwich estate, the manicured gardens, the perfect high-achieving son, Thomas, away at Phillips Exeter, and the husband, Richard, a VP at Stratford Industries, whose star, she was told, was perpetually on the rise. But the reflection was a lie, and the house was a cage. The marble under her feet was cold, echoing the silence that had become the soundtrack of her marriage. Richard had been home for less than 10 minutes, long enough to tear off his silk tie, toss his Brioni jacket over a priceless Louis XV Noir chair, and pour himself a 2-fingered glass of Macallan 25. He hadn't kissed her. He rarely did. "Big night, Ellie," he announced, his back to her, as he stared out the bay window at the twilight descending over his perfect lawn. He always called her Ellie. It was a name that felt like a pat on the head, diminishing, a nickname for a girl, not a woman. Eleanor placed the flute back in the cabinet. "Oh? Another late one?" "The late one. The one that matters," he said, swirling the amber liquid. "We're finally meeting the principal from Vanguard Capital. This is the one I've been working on for 6 months. This E. Vance is the white whale. No one's ever seen them. They're a complete recluse, but they're sitting on billions. If I land this investment, Stratford is saved, and I'm looking at a senior partnership." Eleanor felt the familiar, dull ache of being dismissed. "E. Vance," she repeated softly, testing the name. "It sounds familiar." Richard laughed, a short, barking sound. "Don't worry your pretty little head about it. It's high finance, not a charity luncheon. All you need to know is that your husband is about to become a very, very big deal." He walked past her, pausing to adjust his cuffs in the hallway mirror. "I've got to meet the team for a prep session before the dinner at L'Etoile. Don't wait up." "L'Etoile?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "That's extravagant. You must be confident." "It's the cost of business, Ellie," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You have to spend money to make money, something you wouldn't understand." He was out the door before she could reply, the heavy oak clicking shut with a funereal finality. The scent of his expensive cologne hung in the air, mixing with the lemon oil she'd used on the furniture. Eleanor stood motionless for a full minute. Something you wouldn't understand. For 15 years that had been his refrain. He had conveniently forgotten that Ellie was Eleanor Vance, a summa cum laude graduate in finance and economics from Wharton. He forgot that she had been the youngest analyst in her day at Morgan Stanley, the one they called the Oracle, until she had agreed to step back, to support his career, to raise their son. He had wanted a beautiful, intelligent hostess for his parties and a manager for his home. He had not, it turned out, wanted a partner. Her compliance had been her mistake. Her silence had been his poison. She walked slowly into his study, a room she rarely entered. It smelled of leather and his self-importance. His laptop was open on the mahogany desk. It was a breach of trust, perhaps, but trust had been breached long ago. She moved the mouse. The screen flickered to life, no password required. He was that arrogant. His personal email was open. He was careless. It didn't take long. A folder labeled travel, receipts, hotel confirmations, the Singapore deal from 3 months ago, a 2-week trip. She saw the hotel booking, 1 king suite, non-smoking, at the Marina Bay Sands. But the airline receipt attached was for 2 tickets, his and one for an Ms. Amber Rawlings. Then, the credit card statements. The Amex Black he was so proud of. A charge from 2 days ago. Cartier, 5th Avenue. A love bracelet, rose gold. A charge from yesterday. La Perla, lingerie. A charge from this morning. Bergdorf Goodman. A cocktail dress. It wasn't for her. Her birthday had passed last month, marked by a generic floral arrangement and a distracted kiss on the forehead. The pain was sharp, but familiar. It was the final, dull click of a lock falling into place. She had suspected, of course. The late nights, the sudden business trips on weekends, the scent of a perfume that wasn't hers clinging to his shirts. But this was the spreadsheets, the data. This was the language she understood. He wasn't just careless. He was contemptuous. He believed her to be a fool. She closed the laptop, her hand steady. The crystal glasses downstairs were humming, but she was vibrating with a cold, pure energy. E. Vance. He'd said it with such dismissal. He had no idea. 5 years ago, a distant Aunt Eleanor had only met twice, had passed away, leaving Eleanor her entire, surprisingly vast fortune. It was old money, discreetly managed, and it was left to her, not to Richard. He'd laughed it off as her little inheritance, her shopping money. He hadn't paid attention. He never paid attention. She hadn't gone shopping. She had called David Chen, her old mentor from Morgan Stanley, a man who had been furious when she'd retired. "David," she'd said, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm coming back, but not for them, for me." For 5 years she had been working. While Richard was at his office playing the big shot, Eleanor was in this very study, in the mornings after he'd left, and late at night after he'd fallen into a drunken, self-satisfied sleep. She wasn't managing a household, she was managing a portfolio. Vanguard Capital was her creation. David was its public-facing president, but the principal, the true owner, the one whose instincts they followed, the one whose signature, E. Vance, was on every final directive, was her. She was the recluse. She was the white whale. And she had been looking at Stratford Industries' portfolio for months. The company was a bloated, dying dinosaur. Richard's division, in particular, was a catastrophic sinkhole of bad investments and leveraged risks. They were desperate. They were bleeding. When their desperate pitch for a lifeline investment had crossed her desk, she had seen her husband's name on the executive summary. She saw his projected figures, the inflated, arrogant numbers he'd clearly pulled from thin air. She could have just clicked, reject. But where was the justice in that? "No, David," she had said on the phone just yesterday. "Don't reject it. I want to take the meeting." "Eleanor, it's a dog," David had warned. "The company is worthless. Your husband's division is a dumpster fire." "I know," she'd said, looking at the Cartier receipt on her husband's laptop. "It's not an investment meeting, David. It's an acquisition, a hostile one. Book the private room at L'Etoile. I think it's time for Miss Vance to finally make a public appearance." Now she stood in the silent, opulent hallway. Richard thought he was going to a dinner to secure his future. He thought he was bringing his mistress to celebrate. Eleanor smiled, a thin, cold expression that didn't reach her eyes. She walked upstairs to her own closet, past the beige cardigans and sensible skirts Richard approved of. She pushed them aside, revealing a section at the very back. There, hanging in a garment bag, was a custom-made steel-grey Armani power suit. She had been saving it. "He's right," she whispered to the empty house. "It is a big night." The bar at L'Etoile was a symphony of hushed wealth, low lighting, gleaming mahogany, and the clinking of ice in heavy crystal. Richard felt a surge of power as he slid onto the leather-bound stool, Amber Rawlings slipping in beside him. She was 26, with hair the color of expensive honey and a manufactured brightness in her eyes. She wore the Bergdorf dress he'd bought her, a tight, emerald green number that left little to the imagination and everything to his ego. On her wrist, the Cartier Love bracelet gleamed, a tangible marker of his conquest. "Richie, this place is divine," Amber cooed, running a manicured nail down the lapel of his suit. "Are you sure I'm not underdressed?" "You're perfect," he slurred, emboldened by the 2 scotches he'd consumed in the car. "You're a work of art, and tonight you're my executive assistant, my secret weapon." Amber pouted. "I don't want to be your secret, Richie. I want to be the weapon. You promised. If this deal goes through, you're leaving her." "You're leaving... what's her name? Ellen?" "Eleanor. And yes." "Of course," he said, waving the bartender over for another round. "This is it, babe. This Vanguard capital is the key. Their money washes all the complications away. Stratford Industries has been riding my division for a year. They're desperate. My boss, Harrison, he's practically wetting himself downstairs. But I set this up. I got the meeting with the mysterious E. Vance." "Who is this person, anyway?" Amber asked, sipping the champagne he'd ordered her. "You said they're a recluse, some old money ghost. Probably some 80-year-old fossil in a dusty suit. The point is, they're sitting on a dragon's hoard of cash, and they're looking for a place to put it. David Chen, the president, loves our projections. It's a done deal. Tonight is just a formality, a victory lap, and I wanted you here to see it." This was a lie. The dinner had been confirmed only yesterday. His boss, Michael Harrison, a nervous, rabbit-like man, was already waiting in the private dining room. Richard had called Amber an hour ago, high on his own arrogance and the thrill of the impending kill. "Amber, screw the prep session," he'd said, his voice giddy. "Meet me at L'Etoile. Private room, top floor. I'm introducing you as my assistant. Harrison won't say a word. He needs this deal too much." "Is that smart, Richie?" she'd asked, though she was already doing her makeup. "It's a power move. It shows I'm confident. Besides, this E. Vance is a nobody. Who cares what they think? It's the money that talks. And by midnight, I'll be the man who saved the company." Now, sitting at the bar, he felt a flicker of doubt. Bringing Amber was reckless. It was a F.U. to his boss, and, in a way, to the investor. But one look at her, in that dress, looking at him with undisguised adoration, or a very good facsimile of it, and his ego swelled again. He deserved this. He deserved her. He was tired of Eleanor. Tired of her quiet competence, her muted colors, her predictability. He was tired of the unspoken judgment he sometimes felt radiating from her, as if she knew better. Her, with her garden club and her book charities. What did she know of his world? The pressure? The genius it took to move millions around the globe? She was a relic of a life he'd outgrown. Amber was his future. "So, after you signed the papers," Amber murmured, leaning in so he could smell the Chanel on her skin. "What's the first thing we do?" "First," Richard said, downing the last of his drink, "we go back to the city apartment. we open that bottle of 98 Petrus I've been saving, and then, tomorrow, I go home to Greenwich, and I finally tell Eleanor it's over." "And the house?" Amber asked. Her eyes were sharp. "I like that house." "The house is half mine. She'll get her share, she'll be fine. She can go back to, I don't know, whatever it is she does all day. Polishing silver." He laughed, a thick, cruel sound. "She won't know what hit her. She's completely clueless. Probably thinks I'm in a board meeting right now, stressing. She's probably, I don't know, knitting." "Poor thing," Amber said, with no sympathy at all. She checked her lipstick in the reflection of her phone. "Well, I can't wait to meet this Mr. Vance. Should I be charming?" "He's just a man, babe. A man with a checkbook. Just smile, look smart, and let me do the talking. He'll be eating out of my hand." He threw $100 bill on the bar. "Come on. Let's go meet my boss. Try to look professional." Amber gave him a sly smile. "Oh, I always look professional, Richie. You know that." As they walked towards the private elevator, Richard straightened his tie. He felt invincible. He was a king, and he was about to claim his kingdom. He had his brilliant projections, his unshakable confidence, and his beautiful mistress on his arm. His dull, boring wife was miles away, probably asleep. Everything was exactly as he'd planned it. While Richard was preening at the bar, Eleanor was moving through the shadows of her own life, executing a plan 5 years in the making. Her transformation had begun not with the inheritance, but with the first time Richard had called her cute for correcting his math on a mortgage amortization table. It had begun with the birth of their son, Thomas, when Richard had patted her hand in the hospital and said, "Now you have a real job." The inheritance had simply been the ammunition. When the notification from the probate lawyer had arrived, Richard had glanced at the sum, a staggering amount that he hadn't even known her family possessed, and had immediately started planning. "A new boat, Ellie. We could buy that summer place in the Hamptons. We could—" "No," Eleanor had said. Her voice was quiet, but for the first time it was utterly inflexible. "This is mine, Richard. The will was very specific. It is not community property. I'm putting it in a trust. For Thomas." Richard, seeing his new boat sail away, had scoffed. "A trust? What do you know about managing a trust? Just give it to my guy at Stratford. He'll handle it." "No," she'd said again. "It's handled." That was the day she'd called David Chen. David, a razor-sharp strategist who had been pushed out of Morgan Stanley for being too aggressive, was running a small boutique advisory firm. He'd been waiting for a call like hers. "Ellie Vance, the Oracle," he'd said, his voice cracking with a smile. "I knew they couldn't keep you in the suburbs. What's the play?" "The play, David, is that I'm tired of being underestimated. I have capital. Significant capital. I want to build something. Something quiet, something powerful, and something that is entirely mine." Vanguard Capital was born in her breakfast nook over cups of tea and encrypted laptops, while Richard was in Singapore or London closing deals. David became the public face, the president. He was the negotiator, the voice on the phone. But the strategy, the analysis, the final kill-switch approval? That was Vance. Eleanor had worked with a ruthless, surgical precision she had forgotten she possessed. She hadn't just invested. She had leveraged. She had forecast. She had predicted the fall of 2 tech giants and the rise of a biotech startup, multiplying her initial inheritance tenfold, and then again. She operated from a ghost office in Delaware, a post box in the Caymans, and a secure server in Switzerland. She was the best-kept secret in high finance, and it had been easy, because, as she'd realized, no one ever looks at the wife. She was invisible. She was the woman dropping off casseroles, chairing the PTA fundraiser, and arranging Richard's dry cleaning. Her husband, her friends, the world, they had all willingly participated in the illusion that her brain had softened, that her ambition had evaporated with motherhood. They had no idea that the woman arranging flowers in the hall was, at the same time, mentally dissecting a hostile takeover bid. They didn't know that Ellie was E. Vance. When Stratford Industries' pitch had come through, it was almost laughably pathetic. The company was a sinking ship, and Richard's division was the anchor. He had been cooking the books. Not well, but with the brazen arrogance of a man who believes no one is smart enough to check his work. He was leveraging assets the company didn't have, promising returns based on markets that didn't exist. He was, in short, a fraud. And he had, she discovered, been funding his lavish life with Amber by taking out unsecured, high-interest bridge loans against their house. The house she had put the down payment on, from her old Morgan Stanley salary. The house he had, through legal chicanery she hadn't bothered to check until it was too late, put entirely in his name. He was defaulting. The bank was preparing to seize the property. Eleanor, as E. Vance, had made a single phone call. "Mr. Patterson," she'd said to the head of the bank's commercial debt division, a man who owed Vanguard a favor. "I see you hold the note on a certain Greenwich property. Stratford Industries is about to go into receivership." "Yes, it is." "I'm buying that note, all of it. At a discount. Consider it a favor." In a single 20-minute transaction, Eleanor had become her husband's creditor. She owned his debt. She owned the house. Now she stood before her full-length mirror. The steel-grey suit was severe, the fabric impeccable. She'd paired it not with pearls, but with a single, sharp diamond pin on the lapel. Her hair, usually in a soft, domestic bun, was pulled back into a sleek, severe chignon. Her makeup was minimal, her lipstick a slash of deep, confident red. She looked nothing like Ellie. She looked like an executioner. Her phone buzzed. It was David. "In the lobby. Harrison is here, and he's brought company." "Company?" Eleanor asked, slipping her feet into black, pointed-toe Manolo Blahnik stilettos. "A young woman. He introduced her as his executive assistant, Amber Rawlings. Richard is being familiar with her. In public. The man's a fool, Eleanor. He's handing you the knife." Eleanor felt a cold, clean wave of fury. He hadn't just brought his mistress. He'd brought her here. To this meeting. Her meeting. He was flaunting his betrayal in the very room where he was meant to beg for his professional life. The arrogance, the sheer, blinding hubris, the last flicker of Ellie, the wife who had once loved him, the woman who might have felt a shred of pity, died. "Thank you, David," she said, her voice dropping to a low, chilling monotone. "Let them wait. Order a bottle of the 05 Petrus, and then send the sommelier to the cellar. I want the 98. Have it brought to the table. On ice." "On ice, Eleanor? A 98 Petrus?" David sounded scandalized. "Yes, it's a personal joke. I'll be down in 5 minutes." She picked up her briefcase, a slim, lethal-looking alligator skin case. It contained one item, a single bound file containing the complete, fraudulent history of Richard's division and the original, defaulted mortgage note for their home. She walked out of the bedroom, not looking back at the remnants of her married life. She was no longer Eleanor, the wife. She was E. Vance, the founder of Vanguard Capital, and she was about to liquidate her husband's life. The private dining room at L'Etoile was suffocating in its opulence. Thick carpets muffled all sound, and a heavy crystal chandelier cast a judgmental light over the table. Michael Harrison, the CEO of Stratford, was visibly sweating. He dabbed his upper lip with a linen napkin, his eyes darting between Richard and the closed door. Richard, by contrast, was leaning back in his chair, a picture of smug confidence, one hand resting possessively on Amber's shoulder. Amber, for her part, was taking photos of the centerpiece with her phone, bored. "When is this Vance person showing up? This place is dead," she whispered, loud enough for Harrison to hear. "Patience, babe," Richard murmured, squeezing her shoulder. "Reclusive billionaires like to make an entrance. It's part of their mystique." "He's probably just old," Amber sniffed. The door opened. All three of them, Richard, Amber, and Harrison, looked up. A man entered first, Asian, impeccably dressed, with a calm, analytical expression. This was David Chen, the man they'd been corresponding with. Richard started to stand, a broad, political smile plastered on his face. "David, a pleasure to finally meet you in person. Richard Vance, Stratford Industries." He stuck out his hand. David looked at it for a second before shaking it, once, firmly. "Mr. Harrison." "Mr. Vance," David said, his voice neutral. He did not acknowledge Amber. "And this is my executive assistant, Ms. Amber Rawlings," Richard said, pulling her forward slightly. David's eyes flickered to her, a brief, dismissive glance. "I see." Richard's smile faltered. "And Mr. E. Vance, is he?" David Chen stepped to the side, holding the door open. "Mr. Vance couldn't make it, but he sent the principal and founder of Vanguard Capital in his stead. Gentlemen, Ms. Amber Rawlings, may I present Miss E. Vance?" The click of stilettos on the hardwood threshold was the only sound. She entered the room. If Richard had been struck by lightning, the effect would have been less dramatic. His smile didn't just fade, it collapsed. The color drained from his face, leaving a pasty, sickly gray. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish suffocating on dry land. Michael Harrison just looked confused. He squinted. "Eleanor? Eleanor Vance." "Richard, what? What in God's name is this? Is this a joke? Is your wife? Is she pitching for you?" Amber was the slowest to react. She looked from Richard's horrified face to the woman in the doorway. She saw the suit. She saw the cold, commanding presence. She saw the face she had only ever seen in faded Christmas cards on Richard's desk. "Wait," Amber whispered, her voice suddenly small. "Richie, who is that? Is that your wife?" Eleanor glided into the room. She did not look at Richard. She did not look at Amber. She walked directly to the head of the table, the seat they had all left vacant, and placed her alligator briefcase on it. She turned to Michael Harrison. Her voice was not the voice of Ellie. It was a low, crisp, boardroom contralto, sharp enough to cut glass. "Mr. Harrison, a pleasure." She extended a cool, dry hand. Harrison, baffled, shook it. "Ms. Vance, I don't understand." "You are here," Eleanor said, "because Stratford Industries is insolvent, and you are seeking a $200 million capital injection from my firm. Please, sit." She gestured to the table. She still hadn't made eye contact with her husband. Richard, moving like a man in a dream, stumbled back into his chair. Amber, wide-eyed, sat down hard, her bravado completely gone. Eleanor remained standing. David Chen stood at her right, a silent sentinel. "Richard," Eleanor said, her voice devoid of all emotion. He flinched, as if she had struck him. He looked up, his eyes wide and terrified. Ellie. What is... I don't... The name," she said, her voice lethally quiet, "is Miss Vance. You will not call me Ellie Again. She slowly unclasped her briefcase. Now, shall we begin? Or would you like to introduce your colleague properly? The silence in the room was absolute. The only sound was the faint thump of Richard's heart, which he was certain everyone could hear. Amber, realizing she was the target, stiffened. "I'm quiet," Eleanor commanded, without looking at her. It wasn't a request, it was an order, delivered with such freezing authority that Amber physically recoiled, her mouth snapping shut. Eleanor looked at Richard. Her eyes were not angry. They were not sad. They were the eyes of a banker looking at a defaulted loan. It was an assessment, a calculation. "You're in my chair, Richard," she said softly. He stared, uncomprehending. "What?" She pointed to the chair she always sat in at their dining table at home, the one at the opposite end, the wife's chair. No, she was pointing at the chair he was in, the chair not at the head of the table. Oh, he had believed he was the head of the table. He was wrong. He was so wrong. "You," she said, her gaze finally locking onto his, "are about to find out just how much I understand about business." Eleanor sat. It was a deliberate, regal movement. David Chen took the seat at her right, opening a laptop. "Ms. Vance," Michael Harrison began, his voice trembling, "I must apologize. I had no idea of this family connection. This is highly irregular." "The only family connection here, Mr. Harrison, is the one your Vice President of Acquisitions," she said the title with biting sarcasm, "has brought with him." Her eyes flicked to Amber, then back to Harrison. "I trust she's on the payroll. Her travel expenses must be considerable." Harrison turned a shade of puce. He looked at Richard with pure murder in his eyes. "Richard." Eleanor." "Please," Richard stammered, his hands shaking so badly he clasped them in his lap. "Listen, honey, this is a misunderstanding. This is Amber. She's just an assistant. She is wearing a $6,800 bracelet you purchased on the Corporate American Express 2 days ago, Richard," Eleanor stated flatly. "You filed it under Client Gifts, Singapore Project. I suppose, in a way, she is a client." Amber's hand instinctively flew to the Cartier bracelet, her face pale with horror. "The Singapore Project," Eleanor continued, opening the sleek file from her briefcase, "which brings us to the core of the problem. Your division, Richard?" She slid the file across the polished mahogany table to Michael Harrison. "Page 1. The projections you, Mr. Harrison, have presented to my firm as the basis for this investment. They are based entirely on the Singapore deal, a supposed partnership with Asia Pac Holdings, correct?" Harrison nodded, wary. "It's Richard's flagship project. He's assured the board it's finalized." "Asia Pac Holdings," Eleanor said, "is a shell company registered in the Marshall Islands. It has no assets. It has no employees. It was founded 6 months ago by a... What's his name, David?" David Chen glanced at his screen. "A Mr. James Peterson." "Ah, yes." "Mr. James Peterson," Eleanor said. "An alias, Richard, that you first used in college to buy alcohol. You were never very creative. You created a fake company, pitched a fake deal to your own board, and have been siphoning development funds from Stratford to finance your travel and entertainment for the last 6 months, to the tune of $1.4 million. Harrison made a gagging sound. He started flipping through the file, his face growing paler with every page. He was looking at copies of wire transfers, forged signatures, and fake letterheads. This is, Harrison whispered. "This is fraud." "It is," Eleanor agreed calmly. "And it's the only thing keeping your company afloat. Stratford Industries is bankrupt. It has been for 9 months. You've just been hiding it." Richard finally found his voice. It was a pathetic, desperate squeak. You bitch! You've been spying on me." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Spying? Richard, you used your work email. You left your laptop open in a house I pay the mortgage on. That isn't spying. That's just reading. You were arrogant. You were sloppy. And you assumed I was stupid." She leaned forward. "For 15 years you dismissed me. You told me I was over my head. You told me I wouldn't understand. You told me to handle the seating charts and the canapes while you," she smiled, a terrifying, mirthless expression, "handled the high finance. So let me be very clear, in terms you will understand." She pointed a finger at Harrison. "You, Mr. Harrison, have been derelict in your duties as CEO. You allowed this man," a gesture to Richard, "to commit massive corporate fraud under your nose because you were too incompetent or too terrified to look." She then turned to Richard. "And you are a thief, a common, pathetic thief. You didn't just steal from your company, you stole from me." "I never stole from you," Richard yelled, his face turning a blotchy red. "Really?" Eleanor's voice was silk. "The Amex Black you're so proud of. It's a corporate card, the corporation you've been defrauding, the apartment in the city, the one you've been using with her?" Amber looked like she was about to be physically ill. "It's leased in Stratford's name. The jewelry, the clothes, the dinners at places you can't afford. It was all stolen money. You are a parasite, Richard. And you've been living on a host that's been dead for almost a year." The sommelier entered at that moment, his timing impeccable. He was holding a bottle of 1998 Petrus. "Ah, excellent," Eleanor said, her tone brightening for the first time. "Right on time." The sommelier looked confused. "Miss Vance, you asked for this. On ice?" "Yes," Eleanor said, holding his gaze. "A bucket, just like you'd serve champagne." The sommelier, though clearly pained, did as he was told. He placed the legendary $20,000 bottle of wine into a silver bucket of ice. Richard, a supposed wine connoisseur, stared at the bottle in horror. You're chilling it? That's a 98. You'll destroy it." Eleanor looked at him, her eyes as cold as the ice bath. "I know. You told me you were saving this exact bottle, Richard. You said you'd open it when you finally made it. When you closed the deal of a lifetime. Looks like that's tonight." She turned to the sommelier. "Open it and pour a glass for Ms. Rawlings. She looks like she could use a drink. I'm sure she'll appreciate the gesture." The sommelier uncorked the bottle. The room filled with the scent of a dying masterpiece. He poured a glass and placed it in front of Amber. Amber just stared at the dark, ruined wine. "Drink it," Eleanor ordered. Amber, trembling, picked up the glass. "No!" Richard shouted. "Eleanor, stop this! This is insane! This is our life! You're destroying our life!" "No, Richard," Eleanor said, her voice dropping back to a whisper. "I'm not. You did. You destroyed it when you lied. You destroyed it when you cheated. And you destroyed it when you underestimated me. I'm just settling the account." Richard was broken. He stared at his wife, the woman he had dismissed as a domestic accessory, and saw a stranger. He saw a queen on a chessboard who had just, in one move, taken his king, his queen, his rooks, and every pawn. What do you want?" he whispered, his last shred of dignity gone. "Money? Is that it? You want the house? Take it. Take it all. Just don't do this." Eleanor almost laughed. Want the house? Richard, you haven't owned the house in 48 hours. She slid the second, smaller file from her briefcase. It wasn't a corporate document. It was a deed. You've defaulted on the mortgage for 3 consecutive months. You've been scrambling, taking out high-interest loans against your non-existent Singapore deal to cover the payments. But you finally ran out of road. The bank was foreclosing. They were set to seize the property tomorrow morning. How do you know that? I know, Eleanor said, tapping the file. Because Vanguard Capital bought the note from the bank. I own your debt. I own the mortgage. I own the house. And as the new owner, I am giving you 24 hours to vacate the premises. My security team will be there at noon tomorrow to escort you out. You may take your clothes, your golf clubs, and that's all. Richard's world physically tilted. You bought my debt. You can't. I can, and I have, she said. The locks will be changed by 12:01 p.m. Your home, as you call it, is now an asset in my firm's real estate portfolio, and I assure you, it will be much more profitable without you in it. Michael Harrison, who had been silently reading the fraud report, finally spoke. His voice was a dead, hollow monotone. He's ruined. I'm ruined. The company is gone. Not necessarily, Eleanor said, a flicker of hope in Harrison's eyes. You mean the investment? You'll still— Good heavens, no, Eleanor scoffed. Invest in this toxic heap of fraud and incompetence? Absolutely not. Vanguard Capital doesn't invest in failures, Mr. Harrison. We acquire them. She looked at David, who spoke for the first time. Our team has prepared a tender offer. We will be acquiring Stratford Industries for pennies on the dollar. We will absorb your few tangible assets, your downtown building, primarily, and we will be dissolving the rest. We will take on your outstanding debt, and in exchange, the entire board, including you, Mr. Harrison, will tender your resignations, effective immediately. You're firing me? Harrison gasped. You're being given a graceful exit, Mr. Harrison, Eleanor corrected, which is more than you deserve. You will sign this non-disclosure agreement, and you will disappear quietly. If you do not, I will ensure the SEC report on your corporate negligence becomes the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Do you understand me? Harrison, a broken man, simply nodded, his jowls trembling. Now all eyes were on Richard. He was hyperventilating, his face a mask of sweat and terror. And me? He breathed. Eleanor, please, think of Thomas, our son. You can't send me to prison. Think of his name, his future. This was his last card. The child he had barely spoken to in months. Eleanor's expression, for the first time, hardened into something truly terrifying. The cold calculation was gone, replaced by a pure, white-hot rage that she had kept banked for a decade. She hissed, leaning across the table, am the only one who has ever thought of Thomas. You thought of him when you forged my name on a document to secure a loan against his college trust fund. Did you think I wouldn't find that? Richard stopped breathing. That had been his ultimate gamble. The one he was sure she'd never find. I found it, Richard. I found it, and I replaced the funds. My funds. This morning. You didn't just steal from me. You stole from our son. You would have seen him penniless to pay for her. Her gesture was so sharp, Amber flinched, as if she'd been slapped. This was the moment. The checkmate. Amber Rawlings finally understood. This wasn't a domestic dispute. This was an execution. She was tied to a man who was not just broke, not just fired, but a criminal. She was an accomplice. She stood up so fast her chair screeched on the floor. I didn't know, she cried, looking at Eleanor, pleading. He told me he was leaving you. He told me he was a big shot, that this deal was done. He used me. Eleanor looked at her, bored. Yes, he did. And you used him. It was a transaction. And your investment, I'm afraid, has just gone bust. Amber's face contorted with rage. She looked at Richard, this pathetic, sweating, ruined man. He wasn't her ticket. He was an anchor. With a scream of fury, she ripped the Cartier bracelet from her wrist. The delicate gold clasp snapped. She threw it at his face. It hit him in the cheek, leaving a small red mark. "You loser!" she shrieked. "You told me you were a king. You're nothing. You're a married, broke, nothing." She grabbed her purse, knocked over the glass of ruined Petrus, and stormed out of the private dining room, leaving a trail of dark, expensive wine and cheap perfume. The room was silent again. Richard put his head in his hands. He began to sob. Not quiet, dignified tears, but ugly, heaving, gulping sobs of a child who has been truly, finally, caught. Eleanor watched him for a long, cold moment. She felt nothing. No pity, no satisfaction. Just the quiet, clean feeling of a long overdue equation finally being solved. "As for you, Richard," she said, standing up. "My husband." He looked up, his face a wreck. "Yes? You'll help me? For Thomas?" "No," Eleanor said. "Mr. Harrison gets an exit. You do not. You committed fraud, not just against the company, but against me and against your son. You will not go to prison on my account. What Stratford Industries decides to do, however, is out of my hands." She looked at the terrified, weeping Michael Harrison. "Oh, wait. I am Stratford Industries. David?" David Chen slid a final document in front of Harrison. "This is a separation agreement. It includes a standard clause. The company agrees not to pursue criminal charges against you, Mr. Harrison, in exchange for your full cooperation and silence." "Thank you, God, thank you," Harrison mumbled. "There's a second signature line," David added. "For Mr. Vance." Richard looked. It was the same deal. Silence, resignation, and no criminal charges. You're letting me go?" Richard whispered, disbelieving. "I am not letting you go," Eleanor said. "I am cutting you loose. You get no severance. Your stocks are worthless. Your pension is void. The city apartment is gone. The house is gone. Your bank accounts, which were tied to your corporate fraud, will be frozen by morning. You will walk out of this restaurant with exactly what you have in your pockets. I am not sending you to prison. I am, however, taking everything else. You wanted to be free of your boring, domestic life? You're free, Richard." She picked up her briefcase. "David, please settle the bill, and make sure," she added, with a final, cutting glance at the melting ice bucket, "to charge the wine to Mr. Vance's now cancelled corporate account." She walked to the door. "Eleanor, wait!" Richard cried, scrambling from his chair. "Where will I go? What will I do? I have nothing." Eleanor paused at the door, her back to him. "You know, Richard, I asked myself that same question for 15 years. I was a wife, a mother, a pretty little head. I had nothing of my own. But I built an empire in your shadow." She turned, just enough to look at him over her shoulder. "You're a man. You're the big shot. You'll figure it out, or you won't. Frankly, your future is no longer an asset I'm interested in tracking." She left. The door clicked shut, leaving Richard and Harrison alone in the wreckage. The fallout was not loud. It was brutally, efficiently quiet. The next day, Richard Vance was not led out of Stratford Industries in handcuffs. There was no press, no scandal. He was simply gone. His name was removed from the digital directory before the market opened. His office was a cleared-out shell by 10 a.m. When he'd tried to enter the Greenwich house at 11 a.m., his key hadn't worked. A polite but immovable man in a black suit had informed him that this was private property and handed him a single banker's box of his personal effects. He tried to call his friends, his contacts. No one picked up. The news that Vanguard had acquired Stratford and dissolved the board had spread through their circle like wildfire. Richard wasn't just a pariah, he was a liability. He was a cautionary tale. By nightfall, Richard Vance, the man who had worn Brioni suits and boasted about his Macallan, was sleeping on the sofa of a college acquaintance in a one-bedroom apartment in Queens. Eleanor, meanwhile, was at work. The 68th floor of the Stratford building was being gutted. The dark mahogany and leather of Harrison's regime were being replaced with glass, steel, and light. Eleanor, or rather Ms. Vance, stood in the center of her new, cavernous office, looking out at the skyline of Manhattan. It was the view Richard had always coveted. David Chen walked in, holding a tablet. The restructuring is complete. We've salvaged the real estate division and the biotech patents. The rest was dead weight. We're already in the black. Good, Eleanor said, her voice calm. Start the interviews for the new CEO. I want a woman. Someone with a background in forensic accounting. Someone who's been underestimated. Already have a short list, David smiled. And this came for you. From your son. He handed her a small, express-mailed package. Eleanor's professional mask softened instantly. She opened it. Inside was a framed photo of her and a 17-year-old Thomas laughing at a baseball game 2 summers ago. Tucked into the frame was a note written in his familiar, messy script. Mum, heard about the restructuring. Dad called me. He sounded different. I don't know all the details, but I know you, and I know you finally did what you had to do. I'm proud of you. I'll be home for Thanksgiving. Can't wait. Love, Thomas. Eleanor closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a line through her makeup. It was not a tear of sadness, it was release. The one person whose opinion truly mattered understood. She had saved his future. She had saved their future. Ms. Vance? David asked, his voice gentle. Are you all right? She wiped the tear away, her composure instantly returning. I'm excellent, David. Thank you. What's next? The Financial Times, he said, tapping his tablet. They're desperate for an interview with the mystery woman of Vanguard. They want to know who Eve Vance is, where you came from, what your secret is. Eleanor looked out the window again. The city was hers. The building was hers. Her life was hers. All right, she said. Book it. It's time the world stopped guessing. 3 weeks later, the article was published. The cover of the magazine showed Eleanor, not in a severe suit, but in a simple, elegant navy blue dress. She was smiling, but her eyes were appraising, intelligent, and utterly in command. The reporter had asked the inevitable question. Ms. Vance, you came out of nowhere. You've taken this industry by storm. You were a homemaker in Greenwich. How did you build this empire in complete secrecy? Eleanor's answer was the quote that would be repeated in boardrooms for years to come. I didn't come out of nowhere, she'd said, her voice smooth as velvet. I was always there. My secret wasn't complex. It was simple. I was underestimated. I was the wife. I was the woman in the room who everyone assumed was thinking about the dinner menu. They saw what they wanted to see. They never bothered to look deeper. They never saw the architect in the silence. She'd leaned forward, giving the reporter the money shot. Men like my husband, they see the world as their personal kingdom. They forget that the person who runs the household, manages the schedules and balances the books, is the one who really knows where all the bodies are buried. They thought my world was small. They didn't realize I was just using the quiet to build a new one. The final shot of the article was of her, alone, walking through the new, bustling floor of her company. She was Eve Vance. She was Eleanor. She was, for the first time in her life, completely, powerfully, and unapologetically whole. And she had never looked back. And just like that, Eleanor Vance proved that the most dangerous person in the room is always the one everyone overlooks. She didn't just get revenge. She reclaimed her name, her power, and her future, all in one devastating financial masterpiece. Richard learned the hard way that you should never, ever underestimate the woman you betrayed. What do you think of Eleanor's ultimate checkmate? Was it too harsh, or was it exactly the justice Richard and Amber deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of long-awaited justice, please give this video a like and share it with someone who appreciates a powerful comeback. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story of truth and consequences. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.